Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Welcome. Hi, Ethan.
Hi,
Welcome.
Ben. Long time no see.
I talked to you like yesterday.
Yeah, but on the stream.
Oh, yeah. Long time no see. We actually never talk except for on stream.
Exactly. This is our one and only communication.
hmm That's like, I mean, there are, I think I have heard stories of actual like live streamers who, when like they'll do a live stream, two people will do a live stream together, and then all their viewers like just assume that they're friends and like know each other well and everything, even
Yeah.
if they like have seen each other like 5 times on stream before, and they just assume that they know everything about the other person. It's like I've met that guy like once. We did a stream together, and that was it.
Yep.
Um, but no, we see each other much more off stream than on stream.
You sure hope so.
It would that would be probably beneficial for working together.
Yeah. How was your trip to the Czech Republic?
My trip to the Czech Republic was great, honestly. It was a really, really cool experience to be there and see this language that I put so many hours into in the real world, talk to people, use it, just like see books and stuff in the language. Because having learned like Spanish and German before, I'd seen those languages. I'd know that they exist. They're much bigger. But with Czech, I hadn't really like seen physical like a physical book in Czech before. Somebody did send me one, but like there's so many things like seeing a magazine or a newspaper just like on a random table in Czech is weird because like that's not how my relationship with the language for so long. But all that was really, really great. And I got to use the language, speak, get books, do things. It was really, really rewarding as well because
What were some highlights?
some highlights were definitely going to Brno, and the Polyglot Gathering was super duper cool. Met a lot of great people and got to use Czech. I sort of jammed myself into the group of a bunch of Czech people and was just hanging out with them the whole time, which was great. So that was definitely a
Nice.
super highlight. Doing my Czech course also was a big highlight. I did 2 weeks where I was in Prague, and I signed up for like a more traditional course, and that was really interesting. And I had a really good experience with that. The first day, they put me sort of in a lower level with other more like Americans, other people that had been learning very grammatical, grammar based and whatnot. That was too easy, and so I went up to the next level, which was all Slavic language speakers and heritage speakers of Czech. And so it was a really interesting sort of experience to feel like from the immersion learner side, going into a classroom where it's like the way that I learned is much closer to like a Russian person learning Czech than an
Mm,
American, which I am learning Czech, because they're very related languages. And so
right.
it's like it just the kind of fluency, the kind of instinct that you have is so different, and it was also just cool to be in a room with other people learning Czech and a teacher and all that stuff. We only covered like 2 grammar points in the 2 weeks. It's so slow, but like the actual experience of being there and doing stuff. I also figured out a decent method for like mining during a class, which I used to make a bunch of flashcards and things. And so it was a very good experience. It was fun.
Cool. What language was the class taught in?
Czech. It was completely in
It was
Czech.
Czech. Everything was Czech. Okay.
Yeah, the easier one was like 70% in Czech, 30% in English, but she also
hmm
went really slow. And I also saw the experience a bunch of times of like she would ask a question directly to a student, and they would just answer a different question. And I'd be just like,
Mm,
that's not what she asked. And then because the
yeah.
teacher would be like, yeah, all right, we'll roll with this, I guess. But it's like very clear that their ability just to understand what was going on was not very um, developed,
Yeah.
which kind of makes sense. It's really hard um, to learn. It's a very grammatical language. It's very difficult. So like if you're just trying to grammar your way to understanding, it's like you're going to be there for a long, long time. It
Yeah.
is incredibly weird, but
So what you're saying is you're glad you did the immersion approach before
I
going
am
into a
very
classroom.
glad I did the immersion approach, especially because now I am diving into some grammar stuff, and like since there's declensions, there is a different, like slightly different pronoun or whatever, like slight word for just everything. And so like learning all like the slight differences of it, that, these, those, or whatnot. When I first looked at them like a year ago, I was like, why are there 100? This is horrible. I can't possibly learn all this. But I just looked at it again today and I'm like, oh wait, this all makes sense. This is all easy. It's just this
Yeah.
plus this. Oh, duh. Like it's so different when you just understand everything that's going on and try to learn the grammar versus like also struggle to understand what's happening. So
Totally.
yeah.
I mean, that was, I mean, Steve Kaufman has been saying for ages that, like, you know, study a little bit of grammar up front, but then most of your grammar study is going to happen after you understand, because that's when grammar actually makes sense.
Yeah, I've also been talking to my mom because she's been doing Spanish for a couple of years now and has started to do a little bit more of that kind of thing and engage with Spanish grammar and that kind of thing more. And she did a class a couple of, I think, months ago at this point, and was like, there was a bunch of people in the class, they were so distraught. They were really struggling to understand what the hell the difference is between por and para. And then she even said that one guy like broke her heart because he's like, I don't think Spanish is for me. I've been trying to learn it for like 15 years. This stuff still doesn't make any sense. And she was like, I almost like she wanted to like give him a hug because he seems so dejected about this.
Give him a hug and then give him Refold.
Yeah, exactly. It's the classic of like the uncle hug where like you leave with a $20 bill, but it's like a Refold card or something.
Yep.
So yeah, when you understand the language, it's so much easier to learn grammar. Hi, Biscuit. Oh, I was responded to by Kinky Bidet. What are you doing? You want to be on the stream? Come here. Meow.
Meow.
Although he's not going to be on camera because my camera's up there. Anyways, how are you?
I'm doing okay. I just finished and released the offline support for our app, which has been on my to-do list for a long time because we've gotten a lot of complaints about it. And, you know, I estimated it would take 2 weeks. It ended up taking 3 weeks. So like not that big of a difference, but it's just been all consuming in my mind. So it's finally like I shipped it and my brain like immediately shut down.
You've used all of your brain power for those 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Good job for that. I've been seeing your constant complaints about how difficult it is. So
yeah,
2 thumbs up for me.
It's just like, it's not even conceptually difficult. It's just there are 100 pieces that you have to worry about, and then you have to. It's very easy to do poorly, and it's very hard to do well.
Yeah, I don't know. That seems applicable to a lot of things.
Yeah.
Like language learning, for example.
Yeah,
so maybe
totally.
we could talk about people's questions and answer some things and chit chat about language learning. Cool.
Let's do it. We got some questions?
Yeah, we've got some questions up in the Discord, but also if anybody has questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I will be monitoring that. Not really going to be looking at the Discord that much during the stream because it's harder to focus on. But let's see. Let's start with where'd it go? Is it this one? Yeah. Should be a pretty easy one, but somebody asked about cognates because, I forgot to put their names. Yeah, sorry. Hang on.
Well.
Anyways, yeah, the nameless person is learning French. I started dabbling in French after putting 900 hours into Japanese. The first thing I noticed is just how many English cognates there are in French. There are a lot that are one-to-one, like they mean the exact same thing in English and French, but many that also have different pronunciations and a very different spelling. Then there are some that at first glance look like they're a one-to-one, but also might be used differently in French or English. I know that seeing a cognate should make things easier, but I very often think, well, how will I ever remember this very different spelling or very different pronunciation if I don't make an Anki card for it? What's a good approach for learning cognates and using them to learn languages? Or should you make cards for them, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so I think the first step with cognates is to learn the patterns. And The person that has done the best job of that, I think, is language transfer. I think his name is Mikhail, but he, at least for Spanish, did a very good job of explaining the Latin roots and the way that they conjugate or
Convert
between the two, but sort of the division between them and what it looks like in each language. And so that gives you the ability to sort of see a cognate and deconstruct it and understand what the equivalent would be in English or vice versa. So that's really helpful to sort of learn those patterns. And then the second question is like, do you actually need to study them? Because if you're focused on the recognition and comprehension phase, you don't really need to make an Anki card for that, because when it comes to like remembering, what you're really talking about is production. How do I remember to use this thing in a sentence? And because we focus on production much, much later, you'll get a lot of that stuff for free. A lot of those cognates will come along for free. The ones that usually don't are the ones that are extremely different, or they actually have different meanings. So the false cognates, or like subtly different meanings where like they share one meaning but have a different one, an additional one that is different.
That happens more often for rare cognates, though, that you come across a couple of times. Because if it's really common, like in Czech, for example, the word fine or fakt or normalnie, which like from normally, those are all really common words that actually have quite different uses in Czech. Like they just don't mean the same thing at all, sort of. But you get used to them because they're so common, and so you don't really think about it. But if it's a rare-ish cognate that also doesn't really have the same meaning, that's definitely harder to pick up on.
I think what I mean is there are some cognates that are very common, but the cognate usage is very common, while another meaning that is non-cognate or has a very different meaning may be less common, or vice versa, where yes, this cognate means the same thing, but there's another common usage that means something different.
Yeah.
And so there are anything that's like almost one-to-one, I would not worry about. You'll pick up most of that stuff over time. And if you find when you get into the production phase that you haven't picked them up, you can create an Anki card for it then. If things are substantially different, either because this cognate has one different meaning or a shared meaning and a different meaning, or it's just fully false cognate and has completely different meanings, it's worth making a card for. But yeah, I would not recommend making cards for cognates that are relatively straightforward to puzzle through, because once you know the patterns of them, you'll be able to recognize and comprehend them through immersion, and you'll be able to cement those just through exposure to them. Yeah. So I would not recommend making a list of cognates or a flashcard list of cognates, especially because with something like French, there are so many shared ones with English that
we get like 40% of our vocabulary from French directly or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think when we did the analysis, I think our French deck is about 1,000. It's 1,000 words. But it was something like with 1,200 non-cognate French words, you get like 3,800 English cognate words.
Yeah, you cover essentially the first 5,000 words just by...
Actually, 6,000 with French.
Oh, 6,000
with Spanish.
Yeah.
Wow. You got actually more with French. At least that was based on our frequency analysis. So
I wonder how many cognates there are if you speak English and Spanish into French.
Way more. Yeah, so many more. Like I have to imagine it would only. But again, I think the hard part with French is that the pronunciations are so different that it's probably worth hearing the words repeatedly anyway.
Is there a language transfer French? Probably.
I assume so.
Language transfer French. Language transfer French. Yep, comes up. So I love the intro French lessons, and his name is Michalis, not what you said.
Okay.
I think he's like Greek or something like that.
I think he's Greek. The one thing that I would say about the language transfer program is he's very, very focused on speaking as like the primary means of learning. and he's like, don't write anything down. You should be like remembering everything. And I personally find those recommendations to not be very helpful. There's a lot of great content in it. I just fundamentally disagree with the way that he thinks about language learning.
Yeah, which doesn't mean that it's not useful, like you said, to take all that information and convert it to what works for you. Are you gonna just jump off the? Do you want to get down?
We actually at one point created a cheat sheet for the language transfer Spanish, so that you could just jump to the things that were most important. Where we like listed out everything in the entire course, and we may want to do something similar with the other languages.
I bet now with better transcription and processing with LLMs, that could be done more automatically.
Totally.
Because yeah, that seems useful, especially if you want to like look something up, right? You go, this is annoying me. I would like to learn about it. Where is it? Yeah. Oh, episode 38. Great. Boom.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Because I actually never made it all the way through the course, because I think it's like 80 lessons.
Fake fan.
Yeah, I know. I think I never made it past like 50.
That's pretty good. I listened to like 3. I didn't make it very far at all.
This was back in my like initial I'm going to try and learn Spanish phase before I knew anything about immersion learning.
Oh, okay.
So I thought it was like a really interesting course, like definitely worthwhile doing, just for understanding the roots of a language, because he also talks about like the history of the evolution of languages.
Cool.
And their common roots with different things, and then why certain things get dropped and others don't. So yeah, definitely interesting. Long term, not sufficient.
Yeah, it's a piece of the puzzle.
Yes. Cool. What else we got?
Right, yeah, let's take one from the chat right now. Let's see. I've tried speaking with natives on Discord, but they leave too quickly and don't care much. Okay. Death Note has a question. I'm in stage 3, trying to learning English and trying to speak in Shadow, doing some speaking with ChatGPT. I've tried to chat with natives on Discord, but they just leave and don't really care. What should I do?
Yeah, it's a bit tough, but generally what I would recommend is try and form friendships, not just like one-off. Oh, I'm gonna chat with this person for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes, but like actually try and get to know somebody and make friends. It's harder, but it will lead to more interesting conversations and longer-term lasting friendships. So I think look for people who are interested in language sharing. So someone who is learning your native language, because then they have an incentive to stick around and help. But also just look for people who enjoy talking. There's a lot of them out there. Find the social butterflies and the super extroverted people who enjoy their talking. There are different language communities. So Hello, Talk, and Tandem are the 2 that we generally recommend. But
I'll jump
I would
in
say
as well.
mixed result. Go ahead.
To mention like finding like people to talk to, like that you're going to do something together with, if you want to do it on Discord. Like so Clayton liked to do it was some MMORPG.
Yeah,
I forget the biggest one, I think, like World of Warcraft or whatever it is. Whatever, like he would play a video game with people basically live. I think he did mostly text chatting, but you can find groups of people that play games together, that they do stuff and whatnot. I've done that before, not in other languages, but if you do the same thing as somebody live on Discord, they have like a reason to be there. It's not just like, oh, let's just chat about nothing, because that's like most people don't really want to do that.
Yeah.
And so finding a central thing to talk about is really helpful.
Among Us was really good for that, because you just get matched with random people and you're forced to talk pretty often. It's part of the game.
The game is talking. There are some other good games like for specifically forcing yourself to speak. I also want to throw out something specifically for English learners. There is an AI conversation like company called Sesame. I don't really. It's still like a research preview, but it is a conversational AI that is like really convincingly and really good at having conversations. It's very weird. Like their research article about it is called "Crossing the Uncanny Valley of Voice" or "Uncanny Valley of Conversation" or something like that. And it's totally free to just try. And it's a great thing if you want to like actually have a better conversation, because I feel like chatting with ChatGPT is still a little bit like you can very much tell as a robot. Like this one actually feels like you're talking to a persona, like a person in a lot of ways. It's
That's
very
creepy.
strange. It's very creepy, but I definitely recommend you try it. Like just also to see what's possible. I also believe that it's a pretty good thing to understand sort of what's possible with AI, so that you're not going to just get fooled. Because if this was on a Discord call, a lot of people would have no idea it wasn't a person. Like I asked it, I remember I was trying to record an example, and I asked it a question, and it was like stuttering and stammering, like thinking. I was like, God, that's so realistic. That's exactly what regular people do.
Interesting. But I think at the end of the day, you want to talk with actual real people, because you
Yes.
want to create those friendships, and you can create lifelong friends that way.
Yes. Absolutely agree. 100%.
But yeah, shared interest, shared activity, like definitely helps to bond. And then one of the other things that we recommend is, when you are communicating or trying to like build these friendships, never leave the other person on red. So if they say something to you, always respond back.
And not just with single words. Don't be the okay, cool, great kind of guy. Like actually dig into what they're interested in. Ask them questions, right? Keep the conversation alive, because most people, it will. There's a natural decay, a natural entropy with a conversation, and you have to push it to keep it alive.
Yeah. So don't let the conversation die because of you. Like if it dies because of them, fine, but like don't be the one responsible for letting it fall by the wayside.
Cool. Thank you, Death Note. Please don't write us in your Death Note. Another question from the Discord. Let's see. This one looks good. So sentence mining of CI. So the question here is, hello, I watched a video about the tools that Ben uses to study Czech, and I noticed that he separates sentence mining and comprehensible input. Is it good to do comprehensible input, like capital C, capital I, that kind of slower, comprehensible content where the speaker goes slow, they show things, that sort of thing, and then also mine from that? They have a daily routine in Korean where they do 30 minutes of Anki, 25 cards from the 1K deck. That's a lot of new cards. That only takes you 30 minutes. Wow. And then
Some
three
people are
cards.
beasts.
Yeah. And then 3 cards from their sentence mining deck. 2 minutes of reading in Link. I feel like that's probably like more like 20 minutes or something like that. 2 minutes of reading doesn't seem very useful, but maybe that's what they wrote. And then an hour and 20 minutes of comprehensible input. They watch a series called Crash Landing while they're mining. Is that a good routine?
That seems like a good routine.
Yeah.
But back to the question about whether it's worth sentence mining and comprehensible input. Sure. Yeah, there's nothing bad about that at all. Some people prefer, I mean, ideally your comprehensible input is good enough that you or is easy enough that you are like just picking things up as you go. There's no harm to adding sentence mining on top of that. It may be a little redundant. Like I would expect those cards I would expect you to learn those cards very quickly, because if you are learning them through comprehensible input and then sentence mining them, I would expect them to stick relatively quickly and easily, because they're in that I+1 or 1T category where there's only like one unknown thing with a bunch of context. So
that might be why they're getting through their Anki really quickly.
Well, I thought you said they were doing the 1K deck.
25 cards from the 1K deck and 3 cards from the sentence mining deck, but that takes them 30 minutes, they say.
Interesting.
But if they're reinforcing all the cards from the 1K deck from their CI, right? Because I think that's the other potential issue, is that if CI generally doesn't have tons and tons of words in it, And so a lot of the words in those videos are probably in the 1K deck. And so you might not have that much stuff that's not already covered by that to mine. I'm sure there's definitely going to be some stuff to mine, so it's not a huge issue, but like you could run out of stuff more quickly to mine than if you were watching a TV show.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It will definitely make Anki easier. And for a lot of people, I think that would be a benefit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because when Anki is really, really hard, it becomes a grind and you don't want to do it. But if it's easy and you can get through however many cards in half an hour without too much of an issue, I think for some people, they would find that really motivating. I think I might personally find it demotivating just because it doesn't feel like it's working anything. I feel like I have to work in order, like exert effort in order for something to be valuable. But that's a me problem. So yeah, there's no downside to
therapy stream.
Yeah, there's no downside to sentence mining your CI content.
Yeah, I agree. I actually did that at the beginning because there was no good 1K deck for Czech. So I sort of made my own by using CI and mining words based off just frequency list. And that worked quite well. But yeah, go ahead. Sounds like you're doing great. Good job. Go back to Discord, YouTube chat. Are there other things to focus on while doing active immersion / sentence mining other than just looking for new vocabulary, especially for someone that is intermediate or an upper intermediate level? Yeah.
Well, I guess what you should be doing is trying to understand the content. That's usually the hard part. So if you're not doing that part, start doing it because you're not maximizing your active or interactive immersion.
So to clarify,
in terms of
when you're doing interactive immersion, your goal is to understand the language and push yourself to understand it more than you could if you weren't doing interactive immersion. That often means looking up new vocabulary words that you just don't know what they mean. But there's other things that you also do as well to improve your comprehension, such as...
I don't know, I feel like you have something in mind.
I was going to try to lead it off. For example, grammar points, right? If you look at a sentence and you go, I understand all those words, but I don't really know what they mean together. Why are they in that order? What are they doing? And that might require a grammar lookup or digging into it a bit more. You might notice that you have there's like an idiom or something like that in there. There's other things to look up that aren't strictly just new words. You can also work on your listening comprehension if you're trying to listen by starting without subtitles and then working on it a couple times to train your ears to hear the things that you do already know and process a language like that. That's also a big part of interactive immersion, especially in the more intermediate or upper intermediate phases. But yes, vocab is a pretty large part of understanding the content. Anything else?
Not really.
Great. Okay, let's go on to another question. Let's not do another Anki question though. This should be pretty easy, because it's more about a tool. Nope, that's the wrong one. Sorry. This one. Equalizing audio for shows. Hello. Is there some way to equalize the sounds in shows so that the speech is more in the foreground? I find that many shows are hard to hear simply because of how they were recorded, how old the show is, how it was produced, and that kind of thing. Is there a way to improve this? If you're watching a Christopher Nolan movie, for example. Yes, but it's not easy, honestly.
No.
There are some equalizers that you can get. Like I have an equalizer extension that I use, but I hardly use it. And you can play around. You can boost the frequencies that have human voice in them. But you basically have to learn how audio works in order to do that live. I have not seen a tool yet that utilizes artificial intelligence to naturally boost speakers in regards to music and background stuff.
New business
more
idea.
than a little bit. Yeah, I mean, I've seen as a feature in my podcast app, for example, it can boost voices, and it does pretty good with it. And I just keep it on by default. but I haven't seen like a good one that works like on Netflix or something.
Mhm.
I have seen like that some platforms like work on adding things like that. Not sure if your platform does, but definitely look into it. And then the other recommendation I can give is like to just annoy them in the forums. Um, if you annoy companies like this long enough and enough people care, they will eventually do it. I've been in the forums of like basically everything bothering them to add mono audio support since I'm completely deaf in my right ear. But a bunch of platforms just don't support it, and it's super annoying. It's like I do have like an extension that just turns things to mono audio because sometimes I'm watching something that has stereo, but when it's in the right ear, I can't hear anything. So I need to force it to mono, but like it's not a baseline. It's so dumb, but whatever.
Yeah, that should be a basic accessibility
I
feature, but
know. Like I don't get it. Apple has
you
it
should
actually,
you should
but
petition the what are they called?
American for Disabilities Act.
No, there's the accessibility like web standards group,
Oh.
because they are the ones that create all the standards for like websites,
Huh.
and setting up mono audio is something that they would probably incorporate into their recommendations.
That would be nice. But a new, a soonish version of my operating system is going to have it just at the operating system level, which I'm just hyped for.
Nice.
But funny enough, I did I think like a couple years ago, I was recording stuff and I didn't notice it was in just left, but it was in stereo, but only had the left side on. Because why would I ever check the other way around? Sorry. And so someone was like, I can't hear anything. I'm like, the audio works fine. I'm listening to it right now. And then at some point I realized, oh, it's the fact that I have stereo on, but it's not stereo. But anyways, that is not what they're asking. So basically not really a great option for equalizing audio yet, but probably will be soon, hopefully, maybe.
I'm sure that someone's working on an AI for it.
Yeah, you can already isolate voices pretty well, but like that just removes everything else. And so
Mhm.
hopefully that'll like be combined into just a accessibility thing where you can just boost all the audio on all TV shows ever would be so nice. But yeah,
Especially nowadays when all of these TV shows and movies just add so much background noise, you can't hear anything that's going on.
yeah.
It's obnoxious.
Well, I was watching Oppenheimer on the plane
Hmm.
to the Czech Republic, and I thought the audio was broken. I could not hear the dialogue. And I like tried a different movie and I was like, I can hear this fine. I went back to it. I'm like, I can't hear what the people are saying.
Yeah.
I turned on subtitles, native English speaker, just like, I can't hear anything. I'm sorry.
Yep.
I want to follow the story of this 3 hour odyssey. I don't want to just hear the bwomp, but whatever. Speaking of niche problems, so this is actually a pretty good question, but for a niche language. Oh, shoot, is it this one? Yeah. So, hello. I am learning Ontario Maori, the indigenous language of my home country, and unfortunately, most TV content does not have subtitles. If it does, it's in English, so I have to cover it up. I'm at 160 hours on the tracker, close to 2,000 words known, and can comfortably read novels along with the audiobook. The language only has a few audiobooks, less than 15. No, a few books in it, less than 15, and 4 audiobooks that exist. I have
That was a
access to
small subset.
I only have access to 2 of them because they chose to get the easier ones. They've read one twice, mined all the vocab through it, and the other one, they're halfway through mining from it. I just finished the first one for the second time. Yeah, okay. And wondering if I should reread the second one again or focus solely on watching and listening to a lot of TV content. What balance should I strive for? This is basically more around reading versus listening heavy since there aren't that many materials.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, given the lack of materials, you really have to take a listening first approach. And what I would say about the audio from books versus the audio from TV is the way people talk is going to be completely different. Just because you can understand the audiobook does not necessarily mean that you can understand native speakers just speaking casually. So in terms of striking a balance, I do think that it's worthwhile to re-listen to those books. I would probably, I don't know how long it's been since you listened to the second one last, but I would probably not do that more than once a month or once every other month, because your memory of it will be stronger than your you won't need to listen as hard because you just remember what happened. So the longer you wait to re-listen, the more you'll get out of that experience. But since you're working with such a small amount of content, doing it every month or every other month is reasonable. But yeah, I would definitely focus on the TV show side of the world, since it sounds like you're at a level where you can start to get a good amount out of that experience. You don't have access to the subtitles, which is definitely hard. So you have to learn how to look things up via ear, which is a whole skill set that you can develop, and you'll get pretty good at that. And you can also create listening sentence mining cards, so audio-only sentence mining cards. And that will enable you to better hear the language and look things up from the language, given you don't have the subtitles. And it is a completely reasonable approach to go listening heavy.
I think it especially makes sense when it seems like most of the use of the language is like just between people anyways, because there's not a ton of books, there's not a ton of written stuff. So preparing for that in advance, like if you're going to use it 90% of the time with another person, you're going to be listening. So starting with that is like a good thing to think about. Although it was kind of cool that you could read all of the books in the language. That's a possibility for which most people don't have for their language.
That is true. You could have that title.
Be like, yeah, I read all the books in a language. All of the books printed ever in this language.
Yeah, and when it comes to our recommendation around reading and listening, or focusing on reading first, the reason we do that is because it's easier, and most people want the process to be easier. But it is also entirely possible to do it listening only. It's just much harder than if you had the option to do reading. If you don't have that option and you've already learned 2,000 words, and you can like understand these audiobooks, I think you're perfectly ready to start doing a really heavy listening first approach.
Yes, I would totally agree with that. That's what I was going to bring up. Is where you've already made a bunch of progress at this point, and jumping over to listening is not like you're starting from nothing. So you have a really good base there, which is cool.
Yeah. So if your question is, do I re-listen to this book or do I do TV? I think you're at the point where you could do TV exclusively, and then revisit the books every 2 months or so once you've had an opportunity to like let it fade a bit, because that will cement all of the vocabulary that you learned from those books, and also will likely become much, much easier as you are learning to understand native speakers. So in terms of balance, I'd say go heavy towards TV right now and then come back to the audiobooks in a month or two.
Cool. Thank you for the question. Alexis Dupre asks, I know it's not recommended to use AI-generated subtitles as a beginner, but does that recommendation change when you have access to a service like Whisper or more accurate subtitles? I believe you're actually thinking of people not recommending YouTube-generated subtitles, because before they used to be not very accurate and completely devoid of all punctuation, and they were I forget what it's called when it's like a cascading rather than like individual lines that change. But there's a name for it, because like they come up live, like when I say the word pops up rather than like saying, here's the sentence, here's another sentence, which you can like navigate through. And that's like part of the benefit of having subtitles. You can navigate by the subtitles rather than having to go with like just 5 seconds or 10 seconds.
Yeah, I think when you first brought that up, what I actually thought you were mentioning was the recommendation not to use mismatched subtitles. But if you have access to something like Whisper where you can get accurate subtitles, then by all means do that. It won't be 100% accurate, and you may find that later in the process you realize, oh, this is wrong, or this is different than I was expecting, or it mistranscribed this word or misunderstood this sentence, and that happens all the time. But it'll get there like 99%, and that's good enough for the most part.
Yeah. It's also getting better for other languages. Many of them are not at 99%. But I did use Whisper for Czech over a year ago when it was like 60% accurate, and it was still helpful because I could pretty much tell when it was wrong. I was at a level enough where I was like, yeah, I know that's not the right word. It's not making sense here. But for the words that it did get, those 60%, it was like, oh yeah, that is the key word. And because I just wanted to look it up more easily. I didn't want to necessarily read every single word and assume that it was correct. It was just helpful for looking up keywords and figuring out what's going on in the video or whatever.
Yeah.
But now it's even better. So
as long as you keep in mind that when you look at the subtitle and something doesn't make sense, that it could be the fact that it's made an error, or it could be the fact that you don't have the right knowledge. If as long as you keep that in mind, it's fine to use a tool like that.
Yeah. Subtitles, great. That does remind me of a conversation I had with a user earlier this week, because they were talking about their progress with Portuguese. And they basically made very, very fast progress. And I was digging into like, okay, what'd you do? What was this method that you were doing? And their approach was essentially to brute force just all of the new words that in TV shows that they were watching, and use subtitles, Portuguese subtitles and English subtitles to essentially do instant lookups with it. And the subtitles seemed to be in the fact that they were doing like TV shows and subtitles the entire time to really like solidify these words that they were repping for directly from the TV shows in their Anki, seems to be the one of the biggest helpers for them to make progress. And now they're at the point where they can, like, they basically made progress at double the speed of somebody else that we'd expect in the same position. They do seem to have some other interesting circumstances, but having subtitles, being able to verify, having good content to do it with, like a TV show, just seems to be so valuable.
I mean, if you can identify like a really narrow domain to focus on that you can like master, that will definitely speed up your comprehension of that domain.
Yeah. Cool. We have a comment here in Czech from somebody that I met there. I don't recognize Easy E by name. Any recommendations to? Oh no, I bet I know who this is. I forgot your name. It's not Jacob. It was another generic white guy name like Ben or Ethan though.
Hey, Ethan is not a generic white guy name.
What is it? Tier 2?
I don't know. I know so many Asian people named Ethan.
Oh yeah, I guess I probably do too. But yeah. Okay, generic name, sure. Oh, sorry. Sure. Do you have any tips for learning Czech from the traditional method to something more immersive like Refold? So yeah, how do you go from immersive, non-immersive techniques? So you've been doing a lot of traditional learning, but now you want to get into immersion learning. That's how I'm going to rephrase this. Do you have any tips for somebody? Yeah, let's just assume somebody's been doing a year of traditional classes. They've got a solid grammar foundation. They've been doing some speaking, but they're really uncomfortable understanding. They don't really know that many words. How would you recommend that they jump into refolding? They jump into immersion learning. Jesus, sorry. My brain turned off.
I honestly don't think it's any different from someone starting from scratch. The only difference is that you'll be able to make much faster progress than the person starting from scratch.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing that you're lacking is vocabulary. You likely already have more than enough grammar for the beginning phases of comprehension if you've been in classroom for a year. But you have to apply it, and you can't apply it until you know all the words that are being used. And in a classroom, you learn words so slowly, and they're often words that are completely irrelevant to understanding the language on a regular basis or on a day-to-day language. So yeah, the lack of vocabulary is really the main blocker to comprehension. So I would just start binging new words. as fast as possible.
And I would specifically jump into TV shows.
Mm-hmm.
Binge a bunch of new words. If you don't have sentence mining set up yet, get a basic deck to start with, but then probably start sentence mining since you probably do know like the basic words. But you just need to expand, get into TV shows. They're just really high quality. Use the subtitles, re-listen to things, train your ability to actually understand the language when it's used, and you'll make very quick progress. Especially because you have set yourself up so much with a lot of struggle and probably uncomfort. But focusing on that understanding and doing the understanding part of the immersion learning is going to be really, really beneficial.
Yeah, we would definitely classify this kind of person as a false beginner, where the main blocker right now is you just got to go spend a lot of time with the language and learn to understand it and like learn all the necessary pieces to it. You already have like a foundation, you already have some structure, and now you got to like really fill in that structure with everything else in the language.
Yep. I'd also say take a silent period. Don't necessarily try to speak in this time. You probably had to speak a bunch, but just don't worry about it at all. You will, when you have a better understanding and intuition for the language, it'll be a lot easier to produce the language. And so just don't worry about it at the beginning at all. Don't worry that you ruin anything. Don't worry that you have a terrible accent or anything. Just take a break there, focus on your comprehension side for a couple of months, and I think you'll see very, very fast progress.
Yeah, I was going to say a 3-month silent period should be sufficient. Obviously, depending on how much time you're putting in each day, but
5 minutes a day.
Probably not.
Duolingo style. Thank you for the question. Go back to the questions from the Discord. We have 15 minutes left, more or less. If you have a question, definitely put it in the chat. I think we've gotten to most of them that I've seen here, but I'm also probably missing some. So feel free to rewrite them. Quick question here about Anki leeches. I've been getting an Anki card suspended for being a leech every couple of days. I feel like this is normal, but I shouldn't worry, and that I shouldn't worry about it. But sometimes it's words which sound like others or have an unclear example sentence or bad definitions. How would you classify leeches? How do you think about them?
Yeah, leeches are definitely part of the process. I would need to review our exact recommendations. I think it's in our sentence mining or our Anki guide. But I think it's like you should expect, what, 20% of leeches? 10%? I don't know. I don't remember the exact number.
That's really high.
Yeah. I don't remember the exact number, but yes, you should expect a certain number of leeches. If it's a lot of leeches, that's a problem. But it's perfectly normal for your brain to just not be ready to absorb certain information. And what you do at that point is a matter of preference. You can either try and brute force it through repetition. You can try and come up with mnemonics or associations to ideas or associations to other words that can help you puzzle through it when you see it. Or you can just not worry about it and come back to it in 2-3 months when your brain is more ready for that information.
That's what I'd recommend.
We generally recommend the latter, the third of those options, because you have to work very hard. You have to exert a lot of mental energy to force your brain to learn something that it's not ready for, when you could be putting that energy towards things that you are ready for. So from an efficiency standpoint, we generally recommend just like not worrying about leeches. That being said, if you are bothered by it or you feel like it's actually getting in the way of you understanding something, or you need to like study for a test or whatever else, it is perfectly reasonable to use mnemonic devices or word associations to help you understand those. I wouldn't necessarily go for something like a memory palace. I think those are too convoluted and aren't particularly useful. But a mnemonic device can give you some framing in order to have it reasonably readily available until it solidifies in the future.
I use mnemonics all the time.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I use it sort of if I can tell that a card will become a leech. Like this isn't sticking. I make a mnemonic and it usually fixes it. Sometimes it doesn't. Totally fine. The other thing I'd say is like if you really want a word to also stick better, looking for it in immersion can be helpful. So if you can look through like a corpus or something and find where it is, or find videos that are likely to have the word or whatever, that's almost always when my leeches just become easy common knowledge. I'm like, how could I have ever forgotten this? I just saw it in context like 4 times. Obviously, it means that, duh. That really helps me.
I recently learned a word, podar.
Bodar with a B
Podar.
or with a P?
With a P.
Bodar?
Podar.
What does that mean?
It means to prune.
Oh.
Like to prune a plant.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I was like, I've never seen this word before. And then I learned it and I started hearing it everywhere. Yeah. And it's like, I'm still experiencing the frequency illusion this far into the game.
What is it in the, is it does it also break like poder, like puedo, or is it yo puedo?
I think it's bolo.
Huh.
I didn't actually like spend the time to learn the conjugation structures or anything. I was like, what is this word?
Let's see. We're both looking it up, which is probably a bad
inefficient
example. Yeah. Boldo. Bolde. It's completely irregular. Cool. The more you know.
Yeah. And then I was just like, but I just heard it in Harry Potter. And I'm like, I've listened to Harry Potter 3 times in Spanish. How did I not catch this word?
You weren't pruning it enough?
I was not primed for it. So
you were not pruned for it.
But now I know it. And now I'm like, I'm not going to forget it. So
I probably won't either. So
yeah,
that's the answer. Just talk about your leeches on stream. That'll fix it.
There you go. But the point is, when you see something in immersion, you're like, oh, that word, it often sticks in a way because it provides an additional context. So a lot of what word association does is it tries to like put the word in a different context so that your brain has like multiple connections to it. Mm-hmm. And seeing it in a different context does the exact same thing, but in a more natural way that is more likely to be beneficial and more likely to be triggered by experience in the future.
Cool. Thanks for the answer. Thanks for the question. Let's do one more from the Discord here quickly. Basically, this person is asking that what to do if you have some reason, whatever, it's like a disability or circumstance, whatever, that you can't use much audio. Or there's not enough of it or whatever. Do you have recommendations for continuing to gain vocabulary other than you'll have to listen less and it might take longer?
I mean, for gaining the vocabulary, it's not that big a deal because like reading is, it is much easier to gain vocabulary through reading than it is through listening. The challenge that you're going to run into is the way words are pronounced is very irregular and changes constantly, and native speakers change the pronunciation of things all the time. And without even realizing it, and we don't like the person listening doesn't realize it because their brains are so attuned to be able to just like deconstruct what they say and turn it into something that is turn it into its root word. Yeah, just understand it. So if you have a limitation on listening, it will not at all stop you from building vocabulary or building fluency. What you will struggle with is being able to understand native speakers in casual conversation, and it will likely also affect your pronunciation. So you'll probably not be able to develop like a really high level of native pronunciation in the language. So those are the 2 things to look out for. But you can 100% still gain fluency in the language. It just may not be at the super high level that you may, I don't know, you may not even want that.
Yeah. There's a couple of like pretty well-known polyglots over the centuries that were like just hyper readers. Like they could read fluently in like dozens of languages, but then when you try to talk to them, they'd be like, I don't actually speak Polish. I just know how to read Polish really well, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And if that's your thing, that's also great. Like you don't have to go the listening route, even if everybody around you says that it's what you have to do or whatever. And like, no, you just do what you want to do. If you want to read, read. If you want to read a bunch and then try to figure out how to like find that listening fluency, you can also do that. It's not like you're locked into something forever.
Yeah, I think if you still want to gain the listening ability though, and you have a limited amount of listening time, maximizing, like make sure you have like the amount of listening time that you give towards something is
Yeah.
actually dedicated towards improving your listening ability as fast as possible.
Making the most of your listening time that you do.
Yeah,
have.
that's it. Optimizing your listening
Yeah.
time.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's an interesting question because it's actually not something that I've really thought about before. Because normally for improving listening, there's two approaches: listen broad or listen deep. So listen to a ton of stuff or listen to a small set of stuff repeatedly. And listening to a small set of stuff repeatedly will definitely help you to acclimate your ears to it, especially to subtleties in it. Whereas listening more broadly will give you the experience with the range of potential pronunciations of each word. And
as well as build
the
effortlessness and make it easier and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So I think I would recommend, if you have a limited amount of time, to focus on going deep rather than going broad.
Yeah. Those are buttons that you're pressing. Thank you. Sorry.
So identifying like a limited set of content to listen to and listening to that repeatedly, and trying to get more and more depth of comprehension in that listening.
We'll cover those techniques in our listening course.
We do. And I would also try to like really narrow your focus to one specific accent, really try to shrink the domain of what you're trying to understand listening wise. Because building listening ability that you can understand like every accent is a huge task. Whereas if you really narrow your focus to a few people or a few situations, and like everything, like with any skill set, if you narrow your focus to a smaller domain, it is easier to master that domain.
Great. I think let's try to answer this one last. There's one final question. I feel like we can just cover them all. This comes from the Discord as well. Hello. I review a deck of closed deletion cards in Anki on a daily basis, and I find them very effective when it comes to active recall for my target language. However, I'm concerned that the flashcards may be reinforcing a phenomenon known as pattern recognition. My brain subtly recognizes cues on the card, such as image, first word of the sentence, a ton of other things, and produces the answer based on that rather than recalling the language. This might result in shallow understanding. What are some good practices for avoiding this when doing Anki? It's
a real problem. It's a real problem. It's something that I struggle with too. It's why I don't use sentence cards, because I basically ignore the word and just look at the first two words of the sentence. And it does not help me whatsoever to understand that word in other contexts. So I know some people love sentence cards. I personally I don't find them particularly useful for that exact issue of using too much context around the word rather than the word itself.
Yeah, I can't do audio cards, which is the audio, there's a sentence on the front, because I do rep it once and I know it forever. Like I just can't, if it's an audio from a show or something, I know what they say. It's not useful.
Yeah.
But this is something actually in Matt's original video about Anki and like what the role of Anki and that kind of thing that he goes over, because it totally is a potential problem. Like you do pick up on these things, and the answer is essentially to do a lot less Anki and use Anki just as the starting point for your actual understanding or use of the language. Anki will not teach you the language. It's not going to even teach you the words. It's going to help you to learn the words from immersion. It's going to help you learn to use words in conversations. And so if you're doing closed cards, you're trying to probably produce the language. Force yourself to use those things in actual sentences. Do conversations where you have to use that grammar pattern or whatever it is in a new way, because that's what's actually going to help you get to use it rather than just getting good at your Anki cards. Because if you're good at Anki, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're good at the language.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. If you are only doing production through Anki and you're not doing writing or speaking, then everything that you're learning through Anki is decaying and not actually solidifying into language ability. We see the same thing on the recognition side. If you just learn with Anki and you don't do immersion, all of that knowledge decays very quickly because you're not actually putting it to use. So it is really important that as you are doing this practice with Anki, you understand that that is just prepping that information for you to solidify through other means rather than actually teaching you anything.
If you want to still do some production with Anki, though, you can sort of change it a bit. And instead of being a close card, make a card that is basically prompts you to say something. So Ethan, you did this with I think the Spanish 1K deck. You just had all the words, but instead of trying to remember the meaning, because you knew all the meanings, you force yourself to like come up with a sentence or tell a story about that word that used that word in a couple different ways or something. And so that's
so what I would do with that was I would do 10. So first I went through the deck and I removed all the cards that I thought I already knew how to use pretty easily. So it was just words that I was concerned I wouldn't be able to produce easily. And then 10 cards a day, what I would do is each card that came up, I would produce a sentence about it. And then the next card that came up, I would try to continue the previous thought or sentence and use the word somewhere in that. And so by the end of it, you end up, if you do 10 words, let's say you do 5 words a day, you end up with like a 5 paragraph or a 5 sentence to 5 paragraph long discussion about a topic that uses all 5 of or all 10 of the words that came up in your Anki studies.
Sounds like you get a very nonsense story.
Well, for me, it wasn't even about story. I was like trying to talk about some concept or some topic using the words.
Okay. So less improv, more like I actually want to have a conversation.
Yeah, or I was doing writing. I was doing it as a writing exercise rather than a speaking exercise. And so I was trying to like write a little dissertation on some topic using the words that came up. And you could make it easier just by like selecting a grab bag of 5 or 10 words and then just having those available and being able to craft it that way. It was a little harder to do it piece by piece. But it was also kind of a fun game. So
cool. I didn't know you did that with writing. That sounds cool. But anyways, that's our time. It's 5:02. I'm very tired. Did a lot of recording of stuff for the activity library today. Yep. And writing and other things. So
I've been working like every day for the past 3 weeks, including weekends. So I'm ready for a break.
Nap time. All right. Well, thank you all for being here. Thank you, Ethan, for joining me and answering some questions.
Glad to be back at it.
Yeah, this is fun. We should do it again.
And we will next month.
Next month, this time-ish. See you all then.
Yeah.
Bye.
Cool. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, everybody.